Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Visit them on the web at transcribeme.com/BeanCast for up to 25% off. That's transcribeme.com. Episode 498. Even more programmatic. For Monday, June 4th, 2018. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. It was inevitable. With online audio content peaking and advertisers hungry for programmatic solutions, it was only a matter of time until Google jumped into the fray. But is this a good thing, or simply rampant opportunism? Tonight, we'll discuss. Also, why 6-second ads are so hot, Apple's reemergence with a new ad solution for iOS, an update on GDPR overreaction, plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the digital futurist at Averitt Free Ginsberg, Executive Creative Director, Mr. Colin Glaum. Hi, Colin.
Hey, Bob. How you doing? Good to speak with you again on a Sunday evening.
I'm glad you can make it. Now, also joining us, we have the Vice President of Content for the PGA Tour, Ms. Sloane Kelley. Hi, Sloane.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And finally, we're pleased to have back the CEO of both the Twit Network and artisanal agency, Ms. Lisa Laporte. Hey, Lisa. Almost tripped up on your name there.
Oh, that's okay, Bob. It's great to be back. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, now that I have you all on the panel, let's get into the topics. And of course, the first one is right up Lisa's alley, so we're going to direct this mostly at you, Lisa. But word is that Google is about to launch a programmatic service for audio ads. Now, with podcasts trending upward in popularity and advertisers flocking to the medium, it's not really surprising that they'd be interested in doing this. But Lisa, is this a good sign for the online audio space, or is it a troubling development? What's your take on this?
Well, I have to admit, I'm super excited that some of the big players are starting to step into programmatic advertising, especially with audio ads. Podcast ads work. I work for Twit TV, as we all know, and for 12 years we've been ad supported through host-read ads, and there isn't a medium. So my whole thing is with Google stepping into it and with Panoply stepping into doing the programmatic ads, for podcasts as well, and that's who I'm working with on their new product, Megaphone. They're really bringing this, they're trying to actually set a standard now for this. So I really think with everybody stepping into it, it's going to attract bigger brands into the space versus just a lot of DR campaigns. And I'm thinking for the music platforms as well as for other podcasters. So for me, I think the pros are that we're going to actually possibly develop a standard with Google stepping in and starting to do it. Something that other brands will be willing to consider and bring to the table. My only concern, my hesitation is that don't overwhelm me with too many ads. So when testing this, I don't want it to turn out to be like digital banner ads where it's something that becomes ignored because they're not doing it correctly. So my thought is when I first saw that they're moving to the space too, I'm excited because we've been testing it. We have had our newsflash briefing that we do on Amazon Alexa. We had tested for 3 months doing programmatic audio ads. We had ESPN, we had Progressive. They were 7 to 15 second pre and post rolls. We approved all the brands that were, brought to our Amazon Alexa skill. I had like one grumble from one fan, but for the most part, overall, it wasn't too overwhelming. We matched the audience pretty well. Going for the male audience, I think that worked really well for Progressive, more so than ESPN because we are a tech savvy network. So it probably didn't work as well for ESPN, but I think it's a smart medium for us to be going into. When I take a look at what Panoply's doing with adding Megaphone for podcasters to use, where they can dynamically insert audio ads where they can either record them or you can have them sell them, they're going to command a high CPM. I mean, they're going out there saying it's a $50 CPM to buy a 15-second ad. A 30-second ad is a little bit more, and a 60 is even more. But the reality is I think it's really going to give us a medium that now will finally, come up with something for us to automate and actually provide some numbers and attract larger brands to the space. So I'm, for one, all in.
So much to unpack there. I'm like, my head's spinning because there's a lot of different angles that I need to cover. I mean, and the first and foremost is, yeah, you didn't get a lot of complaints, and yes, you matched the ads to the audience. And I'm sure that's what the early pitch for that service is. But look at what happened to radio. I mean, look at what happened to your average radio station, average ad load. Yes, you still had the occasional live read ad, but mostly it went into this overwhelming mass of advertisements that are inserted in, so you get maybe half an hour of content for every hour. I mean, I can see this being really attractive on the front end. But on the back end, the needs of advertisers and the greeds of the people involved is just going to wind up making this a problem, isn't it?
That's the part I'm worried about. My biggest con is, if you do this, don't overwhelm the audience with too many ads. Don't turn this into radio. Don't turn this into TV when it's like, go Warriors for tonight. When I'm watching a Warriors game, I don't want to see a bunch of, ads in there. So that's my biggest concern. Your concern's my concern, but if they're smart in how they do it, we didn't allow too many ads. And if people can, be intelligent about catering to their audience and not overwhelming them with too many ads and getting too greedy, then it'll be more effective. Right now, if you set the bar high, you set the cost high, you don't overwhelm the audience with, 32 ads an hour, it could be a good thing. Could it be a bad thing? It could be a bad thing if people go crazy and they get greedy. They try to force way too many ads, it drives the cost down and the effectiveness down. So that's the con for me, is to see how people will actually utilize this. And if they're really careful to not put in too many ads, I think it'd be very effective. But that's the unknown element.
Sloane, as the one advertiser on this panel, the person who'd be most interested in using a service like this, one of the big draws for podcasting is the authenticity of having a live read recommendation or having some kind of ad that's created by the person who's doing the cast. And, when you're getting into pre-produced advertisements, you run into more of a need of reach and frequency than you do with a live read ad, which just needs to be reach and engagement with that ad. So with reach and frequency being much more important, the emphasis on frequency, is this going to be attractive at a reduced ad load level, or do you need to have more impressions using a unit like this in order to be effective?
Well, I think the beauty of this is that it really is going to play into some moments where I think you'll have more of a captive audience. So that kind of frequency play that may not be quite as important here. I mean, if you think about the situations where someone is really going to be engaging with this kind of content, it's when they're listening to a favorite podcast, they're, jamming out to music, maybe they're at the gym or in the car. Like you're not going to run into these situations where people are really kind of looking to click away or to engage in something else. So it feels to me like this is really kind of technology sort of catching up with user behavior. And, I think that it may end up being a little bit more valuable as a result.
The value was the other point that Lisa brought up that I found really interesting. A $50 CPM is pretty much the best case scenario for an ad unit like this. I mean, most ad units that I've heard of that are pre-produced and running in any kind of programmatic solution are going to be running around the $12 mark, but a $50 CPM is pretty outstanding. Colin, do you think that your advertisers, the people who are doing digital marketing in the kind of brands that you work with, would they be interested in running an ad solution at a $50 CPM, given that that's kind of high for the typical ad unit on a podcast?
I'm trying to make them interested in it. I haven't been very successful so far. I was an early adopter of podcasts just as a listener. And what I kind of want to throw out to the group, especially to Lisa, because she's already mentioned one of my favorite producers, Panoply. They do, and a host of others, like Adam Grant being another one who I think works with Ted to do his work life. What I see from the ones that are really, really successful and should command those $50 CPMs are the ones who are organically incorporating that into their conversation or the format of their podcast. Adam Grant, as an example, he specially curates his advertising partners in such a way that he can then do case studies on them that are relevant to the listener and to his podcast.
Yeah, but that's exactly the opposite of what these programmatic solutions are going to be doing. That's where somebody curates a live read recommendation or creates an ad that's specifically targeted with the voice of the host and gives more of a recommendation feel to the ad experience. This is not going to be that. It can't be that because since it's programmatic, it's a single ad unit that's being inserted across many podcasts, which takes away all the personalization.
Hold on. So there's one thing that I've been working with Podcast One to try and figure out. So we have a client who is looking for a very specific regional advertising. They have found a way, or at least the way that they expressed it to us was that they can digitally insert ad units into DMAs. So if a person downloads the podcast in a particular area, that podcast can be downloaded with this ad unit inserted inside of it. What we've asked them to do or to look at is, can we make them regional specific ad units so that if it's going to be downloaded in Florida and the Miami area, it's got one unit that runs. If it's in New York, it's another one. If it's in Boston, it's another. And the answer so far has been yes, we can do that. Now, it's up to us as the creative agency to create ad units that are going to be specific to that audience. And that's where I see that programmatic kind of working. If it's just going to be a generic insertion of an ad, it's going to be one of those things where, to Sloane's point, you're kind of got a captive audience and you might not click away, but the weight of those ads kind of interrupting my programming, especially when I've been conditioned to listening to podcasts that either have something really magical about the way that they do them because they're coming from the host themselves, or they're front loaded or back loaded, like the way Tim Ferriss does his. I barely listen to his ads because I know they're the first 5 minutes of his podcast. So I just breeze through that and turn on the podcast, 4.5 minutes in. So I'm not saying that programmatic isn't going to work here, but I think it's incumbent upon us as marketers to try and find a way that makes it organic to the medium and makes it relevant to the medium. Because if you just start inserting ads into it, you're just going to drive people away. What we found with every piece of technology is that the more ad cluttered it gets, the less receptive people are. And there's this magic moment, for like a good, 16 to 18 months on a new technology where click-through rates are high. It's new experience. There's all kinds of fun things to explore on a new medium. But as soon as it becomes overly and it's going to be a conversation about Facebook later, so I don't want to ruin the surprise. But as soon as the medium becomes inundated with ads, people turn out and drop off of that channel looking for the next thing that's quote unquote free or ad free. And so I would hate to see that go or that trend happen with podcasting. But I'm fearful that because programmatic doesn't have that human touch to it, that's exactly what's going to happen.
And that's another concern that I wanted to bring back to Lisa's attention and get your impressions on this. Is it just the word programmatic that I'm reacting to negatively because of all the bad press that's associated with the programmatic universe? And what is different about the solutions that you've been testing that will help to reduce things like ad fraud, help to make sure that the targeting is going to be as effective as you possibly can without the problems that programmatic has been experiencing?
Well, I'll agree with you. I think programmatic, everyone just kind of goes, ew, it's like that slimy used car salesman that you don't want to talk to. But no, what's unique about this platform, and we're just in the process of setting it up, and we're going to actually launch the Megaphone platform next month, is that I can control how many ads are going to be placed in the programmatic setting. I can actually sell it myself, in which there's no rev share at all with them. I can have my hosts voice the ads. So we can still do things more personalized if I control the actual ad buy. Now, if they're selling it, I can still control who they sell it to. I can still control, like I can listen to the ad reads and approve them prior to implementing them. And if we keep the bar high, and by the way, I do command $30 to $45 CPMs on our network already for host read ads. And so to me, the way I look at doing this programmatic ad spend, if I can sell it to my existing sponsors and advertisers, we're controlling the ad reads, we're controlling how many ads are going to be inserted, and then we can also control where we're geo-targeting, because with Megaphone you're actually going to be able to go, okay, I want to hit California, I want to hit these zip codes. I mean, we can really control by region across the world, and we can control to zip code in the US. So for me, I'm not really going to be testing my front-loaded podcasts. We sell pretty well. But if I have unsold inventory, or if I have some, I do have some evergreen content, I'm going to be testing this platform out. And to me, as long as we make sure I don't overwhelm our audience with too many ads, we sign things that make sense to us, we educate our audience that either we're going to have our hosts voice these, or what we're doing, but we've approved the advertisers, I think that will work. It's really going to come down to, in my eyes, making sure you cater to your audience, making sure you're testing appropriately, and not turning this into radio and TV. So, and for me, the other upside to this is that they're doing testing, and they're going to be getting metrics using, they partnered with Nielsen. So what I really like about that is I try to deal with a ton of ad agencies, these huge digital agencies that know nothing about podcasts. So I'm constantly educating them, letting them know what we do. And they're all about tracking pixels and this and that. And it's like, that's not what you get when you come to us. You get an influencer introducing your brand to our audience. So I think with adding this, if people do it right, and if the metrics come in, I think honestly, we can see a ton of big brands coming in and testing this medium. And if we do it right, it could be an amazing thing. My only concern is the people that just go, oh, I just want to make a ton of money. How do I slap as many ads on my content as possible? I think that's where people are going to get into trouble. But for me, I'm very conservative in my testing and how we're going to proceed and do the first round. So I'm just more excited about it because we still cater to our audience. It's all about the audience. And I think if people pay attention in their content, who they're catering to, I think this is going to be a great thing.
I have one last question after that, because that was really a very insightful look at what you're doing and what this is capable of. So thank you for that. My only question left, though, is from a pricing standpoint, if you're already commanding $35 to $40 for a live read, which is what I would consider, and I guess most advertisers would consider, the premium product, how are you going to convince them to buy a $50 CPM on something that's maybe a little less personalized and more general ad unit being sold through the system?
Well, I think I've thought about that too, because that was along the lines of, everything before I actually signed up. It took me about 3 or 4 months.
And sorry for putting you on the spot so much. I feel like I'm too.
Oh, no. You put me on the spot. I love being thrown in the fire, because I actually have thought of this and had conversations, talked to people, talked to my team, talked to other networks. I do sell for other networks. So, it's not something, I don't just test things lightly, especially like this. My whole attitude is I'm not doing my first tier shows. So we're going to be posting our shows. We're commanding these long ad reads. I mean, I sell my interstitial ad read at 1 to 2 minutes. Frankly, they're 4 to 5 minutes long. I mean, you listen to our network, you know how our shows work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you do lose kind of a little bit of that. But my attitude is I'm talking about after we've delivered and satisfied those ad reads, I'm not going to be leaving them in the content of my shows anymore, because to me, that's just free ads for all of my sponsors down the road. So we're going to be looking at taking our evergreen content. We're going to be plucking out those ads that were already there. And as people are downloading, our old triangulation shows, our old screensaver shows, they're going there and they're pulling down a show that's a month or two old for a reason. So my attitude is, well, I'm going to sell these programmatic ads on our, second tier, which is our shows we've already done our first ad tiers on. And odds are people are downloading that show a month or 2 months later. They're going to listen to the show. So my leverage is you're going to be getting, our evergreen content, and you're going to be getting the downloads that people are doing 2 to 3 months out. So I'm not doing my, first release of my shows. So my attitude is it's almost a guaranteed listen. I can't guarantee that everyone's going to listen to everything when they download my podcast or when it's going to happen. But if you're going to be buying the second tier, the second wave coming in, it might be a more effective, ad read for them, or almost a guaranteed listen. So that's really going to be my leverage when testing this out. And then, we can go from there. I'm assuming since the pricing is set that I have some flexibility if I'm selling it. So I might be able to just bring it to my $45 CPM rate and say, hey, or guarantee first position, ad for that $50. So that is kind of where I'm going to play with testing it initially. But it's a good question just because of that, but because of how I'm testing it. I'm pretty sure I can almost guarantee a listen if somebody's downloading a show we released 2 months ago. I mean, they're going to get it for a reason. So,
well, let me test this out here with Sloane. Not to put you on the spot, Sloane, being again the advertiser here, but does having this programmatic solution being the primary advertising solution actually make the live read more valuable to you? And would you be more interested in paying a higher rate for an ad that's a live read when it's in the mix with other ads that are more programmatically based?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I think the way that Lisa is thinking about it, though, is spot on. If you think about the live read as being certainly very compelling and important in the moment, but having kind of a strategy for evergreen content, I think there's an interesting way of looking at the world. And, I don't handle ad buying for us. I'm trying to kind of wrap my brain a little bit around how folks at my company might handle that. But even more on the publishing side, kind of where I sit, I think that sort of a strategic approach, it makes a lot of sense. And it, from a brand perspective too, I think it can make a lot of sense. And you're obviously having the testing and the metrics to back it up will help along the way. But being able to sell content that might be a little bit older but still really relevant to a particular audience is very interesting.
Well, and there's one more point I didn't point out too, Bob, is that now I can geo-target, whereas on my initial first release of my shows, there's no geo-targeting. I mean, we're a global network. We're 75% in the US. The other 25% is global, heavy emphasis in Canada, UK, and Australia. But the reality is now, if I come to you and you say, hey, I only want to hit these demos, I only want to hit these zip codes, I only want to hit this region outside of the US, now you are buying a specific target and demo. And so it makes it pretty valuable in my eyes, if I say, okay, you're going to hit exactly who you want to reach, we're going to cap that, to those regions, and I'm going to still have, Lisa Laporte or Jason Howell or Megan Maroney do the ad read. That ups the value of this second tier ads.
Yeah, it certainly does. Well, I could talk for hours about this. Obviously, this is near and dear to my heart, but we got to move on to the next topic. A recent survey seems to indicate that most media buyers out there find that the 6-second video ad is the most effective digital video ad unit available. Colin, look, it's obvious why the ads are viewed through more often. You've got this situation where the ad is going so fast and finishing so quickly that of course people are going to sit through it. But is ending an ad before it can be clicked off enough reason to judge effectiveness? What's your take on that whole study?
I've seen so many other studies. They all say that the 6-second ad is very effective. So I'm not going to say that this study is saying anything out of the norm. I think what you're asking is slightly off from what I would expect to hear from if I was asking this to one of my clients. And one of my clients, I would say, well, what are you looking for? You're looking for awareness? Are you looking for engagement? Are you looking for, is someone in the funnel looking at a consideration, trying to get into the consideration set, or are you looking to convince them that they need to pick up the phone and dial and call you or something like that? And I think there's ad units out there that do each of the above. I think the 6-second ad can be super effective for brand awareness. It shows, if you look at Unskippable Labs, which is the Google YouTube think tank on this subject, they've done a number of studies across different industries. A friend of mine who works at a large shop had one of his ads selected to go through this process. They had a 3-minute ad, or I think it was like 2 and change, a 15-second ad, and then a 6-second ad. Every one of them had the exact same brand awareness, whether it was shown through the 6 or watched all the way through. The thing that's really interesting is that they had more completions, or longer engagement through the longer form one than they did on the 15. So they chopped this 15 down to just make like a little branded unit out of what was a much longer story. And it performed more poorly than the longer format one because they had a compelling story to tell. And, if we go back and, think about how long storytelling has been going around, millennia, there's different iterations of every kind of way that you can tell a story, all the way down to that old anecdote when you have, I almost said Walt Whitman, but it was actually Ernest Hemingway. He tells his shortest novel was 6 seconds, right? That's the story. 6 words. So the idea that we can tell a really compelling, fun story, and YouTube and Google show marketers a bevy of them. There's some really genius ways to execute in 6 seconds out there. Is that necessarily where you want to be as a marketer? I would say sometimes yes and sometimes no. So if you're just looking for brand awareness and you know that your 6 seconds is going to be just as valuable as the 15, buy that unskippable ad up front. If you think that TrueView is the way to go because you have a longer, more engaging story that starts off with a bang, and it's going to get somebody hooked and they're not going to hit, click off of it, and you don't have to run the risk of paying for the ad if they do click out of it, then I would go that route. It's really a matter of what you're trying to accomplish before you actually say a 6-second ad is the most effective way to go.
I have to interrupt you on this one because I agree with you. When you have tactics that are clearly defined, you can be effective in any length of time. I mean, people could do a 2-second ad, and if it has the right tactic and it has the right objective and you can achieve it in 2 seconds, of course it's going to be more effective than any other ad unit. But my question is this general thought that 6-second ads are better than 15-second ads, that they're better than 30-second ads. They get completed more often, so there's this perception that somehow the ad is more effective, but it's not necessarily more effective. I mean, when we do a controlled study, we can find out that yes, people recognize your brand through a 6-second ad and that they completed the ad more often than a later ad unit, and yes, it sounds really great, but it doesn't really tell us from a general sense whether or not the ad is being more effective. I mean, Sloane, when you're talking about creating an ad, you deal with long form content. I mean, you're dealing with the long form aspects of outreach with the PGA Tour. That doesn't mean that a 6-second ad is bad, but at the same time, you depend upon longer story and engagement, and that's important as well. So does this frighten you in any way to hear that people are thinking that 6-second ads are more effective than the longer form content type plays that are so popular?
I mean, I think it actually encourages me. I think in an ideal world, people are approaching their advertising strategy the way that Colin just laid out, but sometimes it doesn't come to fruition that way. And in those cases, sometimes, and this is maybe a little bit selfish from kind of the publisher perspective, but we might have, we publish a ton of shorter form content across our platforms, and part of that is by nature of just audience preference, but part of it is just by nature of our sport. We might have an amazing highlight of a hole-in-one, or maybe there's an alligator on the golf course, and it doesn't need to be a longer video than 20-30 seconds. And if you end up having to, as a user, go through and sit through a 30-second ad before you watch a 30-second piece of content, it's not always the best user experience, which I think, certainly if you're walking away and you have a fan that's annoyed because of what they experienced on your platform, it can have a negative impact on your brand from kind of that publishing perspective, but it can also have a negative impact, I think, on the advertiser too. So it seems to kind of get around a little bit of that aspect, which I think is good for the audience. I think it's kind of good for everybody.
Absolutely. I think that the shorter form ads are solving a very specific problem, which is that people feel overwhelmed by advertising online, and that this is a way to get a brand impression with very little impact on what the user experience is. So that's the positive in all of this. But I guess what I'm getting at here is, does the need for short form actually make us feel lazy about the kind of stories that we're telling? I mean, Colin, you started to talk about the fact that longer form ads can be effective if that's what your story is, if it's engaging enough. And for me, I kind of feel like the real story here is that 6-second ads are not necessarily the most effective ad unit. It's just that, when you're trying to tell a story in a longer form ad, you need to have a much more compelling story that's going to keep people there. And that 6-second ads are just for simple brand impressions. And that in the mix, it doesn't make one better than the other. It just makes one better for a certain tactic.
There's truth to what you're saying, but I would also argue that it's even harder to tell a compelling story in 6 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So the art of telling a story, if you guys are not familiar, check out a guy named Zach King, who tells amazing stories in 6 seconds on a very regular basis, maybe 10, 15 seconds at the longest, but he's
amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
He did some content with us last year during the FedEx Cup playoffs, and he's brilliant.
Yeah, his work is, for years now, has been just one amazing piece of brilliance after another, and he tells great stories in 6 seconds all the time. So it can be done. It takes a certain level of talent and a great mind to be able to do that on a regular basis. So there's not that many of them out there, but I think that there's also an opportunity for the 6-second ad, as Sloane was pointing out, to be a teaser to get to a longer form piece of content. How do you get somebody to click on something to get to another channel or another publisher or another outlet? And there is fun, interesting ways that you can use a shorter form piece of content to get to a longer form piece of content, and it happens on a fairly regular basis.
No doubt. I mean, I agree with you from that standpoint. I mean, there are some great ways to use 6 seconds for telling a compelling story. I'm just saying that that's only going to happen in a small percentage of cases, and most people are looking at how can we dice and slice our 30-second ad from the TV buy into a 6-second ad that we can then place in front of a YouTube video. I mean, I don't know what your ad experience is, but my ad experience is filled with really, really bad 6-second ads. And I'm sure that every single one of them is showing much higher completion rates and much more effectiveness in their quote unquote brand awareness because of that. But are they really? I mean, it just seems to me that when we hear a study like this and we start to come to the conclusion that the 6-second ad is the best possible way to go out, the most effective way to spend your money, you're going to end up with a lot of really bad 6-second ads. And
I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I just don't want to. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there is effectiveness that's been tested across the board from more reputable brands than the article that we all read together. And they say that the awareness lift or the awareness brand recall is the same from a 6-second ad as it is for a 15 or a 30. So if we table that and say, okay, great, you can get away with it for 6 seconds, what is the actual benefit of having just that 6-second ad? Is it just because you don't want to have somebody skip past it and you want to pay for that impression? Or is it because you've condensed the story so well that it actually resonates in a more relevant fashion than a 15 or a 30? And so I agree with you. If you just want to slam a billboard up there, that's fine. You can do that. But I would argue that every medium that we're talking about tonight has its own special merit, and we should be treating them like the opportunities that they are. I think podcasts should come from, if you have a really relevant host with a really engaged audience, they want to hear the message come from that host. If you're looking for a pre-roll thing, tell me a really funny, quick story that elucidates your brand in 6 seconds. That's fine for me. If you're going to make it unskippable and it's 30 seconds and you're boring me to tears because you're just running a regular ad, it's that you've completely wasted your opportunity because you've not tailored it to the medium and the audience that it's intended to reach.
Lisa, I've been remiss about asking you about this. I mean, you have a lot of content that's being shown on YouTube. You obviously do partnership deals with YouTube to generate ad revenue. At the same time, you're doing long form ad reads. You said that your ads are running as much as 4 to 5 minutes during the course of the content. Does a 6-second ad have any appeal to you in terms of not getting in the way, but still giving advertiser value?
I think you can give advertiser value. I wouldn't just run 6-second ads. We have done that on our Amazon Alexa skill where we were running 7 seconds, so maybe a second longer. We ran several
we're going to hold your feet to the fire.
Yeah, well, but but the reality is I don't, when people reach out to me and I'm like, well, what else are you doing? When they reach out to my agency and they're like, hey, I want to do a branding buy or I want to do a direct response buy, I always want to know what they're doing. It's like, I wouldn't recommend just doing 6-second ads, but I would do long form. I would do, 30, 15. You could do a lot more. And yes, we partner with YouTube, but we let everyone skip our ads if they want to. We don't make anybody suffer through them. So, I got to tell you, I think established brands or people doing storytelling and they're staying on a specific channel and they're doing long format ads, why not do a 6-second ad for, I agree the unaided recall is probably similar to a 15-second ad, but I wouldn't just be doing 6-second ads. I would, do it for a short-term YouTube clip that Sloane was talking about. That would be great, having a 6-second ad, but you've got to diversify your ad reads and make sure you do more than just that. So I'm not opposed to them. It wouldn't be the only thing I would be doing.
Well, moving on to the next topic, Apple is getting back into the ad business, according to reports this past week. Sloane, after the iAd's ultimate failure, some might call a fiasco, and Apple pushing the idea that they don't use their data for ad tracking, is this a good idea for them to get involved in creating an ad network for iPhone apps? I mean, I can see the financial value, but from a standpoint of PR value, it looks like it's a bomb ready to burst.
Yeah, this is such an interesting topic. Just even setting aside my professional hat for a second, I'm always interested in Apple news, but it always, I think there's always a question for me when I hear about big tech companies evolving or changing things, and it always makes me ask the question, like, what are you? Like, are you a platform? Are you a service? And with Apple on the PR front, I mean, they've really drawn a pretty firm line in the sand on that type of question, really saying, we're in it for device sales for our revenue. And, by the same token, you have iPhone sales that are a bit down versus past years. So in order to keep growing revenue, it might push them into this world where they have to start monetizing the customer. But it's I think a bit confusing. Tim Cook has definitely talked about the fact that, I think as recently as a month or two ago, that he doesn't see Apple heading down that path because it would kind of, I think, put them in the same space as other giants like Google and Facebook that are really all in on data and personalization. And he, I think, used the word creepy when it comes to those types of
exactly
of ads. So
exactly. He talked about this. He was very, very vocal about this. And then why come up with this now? I mean, the timing couldn't be worse in a lot of ways. I mean, to be talking about this right after slamming Facebook for the same type of behavior. I mean, Colin, from a standpoint of having a baked-in ad system on the iPhone, that sounds pretty good as an advertiser. But from the standpoint of the overall user experience for Apple users, what do you think about this? Is this going to cause them problems long term?
Well, they've been, in my opinion, I've been really sour on Apple for a couple of years now because they keep, at every turn, they seem to be mucking up their user experience. The situation with, I think they went defunct in 2016 with iAd. Is that what it was? I think it was some time a couple of years ago. Right. The idea of having that as a quiver, or an arrow in your quiver, I should say, as a marketer, awesome. But what I've come to experience from Apple, I mean, even if you just look at what they've done recently with the App Store, trying to turn it into like a content hub where you can like surf and like learn stuff, it's just getting in the way of me finding the stuff that I'm actually looking for. So in 4 or 5 instances over the last couple of years, they've tried to be that friendly giant company, and what they've only done is just made their platform a little bit less usable overall. And so I think this is going to be another example of it. I don't think that they have the internal horsepower to understand or to compete with Google or Facebook in terms of creating ad experiences. They're going to have to play a lot of catch up unless they're just going to rip it off entirely. So I don't see it being a benefit to them to get into it. They're a hardware company, in my opinion, that's really good at making toys. They are software for the most part. If you look at their mail client compared to Google, if you look at their iChat compared to a whole bunch of other like Facebook's, they're just really far behind in the software category. And I don't think this is a good way for them to try and like turn the corner and monetize it. I think their bread and butter is hardware, and they should stick with that.
Lisa, as a person who's running a media agency, does this appeal to you? Are you getting any calls from clients immediately? Is anybody saying this is something that I really want you to investigate, or is this something that is troubling to people who you're working with?
I haven't had any requests for this yet. I find it troubling because I'm kind of on the Tim Cook bandwagon of saying how creepy it is, and then now they're stepping into this platform, which does not make sense to me at all either. And I agree with you. I think they're a hardware company. However, rumors say that WWDC next week that there's going to be no new hardware announcements. So
is that really surprising? Is that really surprising? I mean, I know that they've used GDC, the developer conference, WWDC, to launch products in the past, but it's ultimately not a product event. It's all about the software and the developers, right?
I agree, but nobody likes the MacBook. So I was hoping that they would, pull their head out and actually announce a new MacBook. So that'll be interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I'm on the fence on this one. I'm going to wait and see what happens with it and see if they can actually, I hope they rip it off from Google because frankly, they need to do it right. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. But no, I've had nobody even interested in it yet. I think we need to see what happens because they bombed so badly a couple years ago at this that I just need to see what happens with it before I'm willing to put a toe in.
Yeah, I mean, Jobs was famous about saying if we're going to get into ads, we're going to do it right. And of course, they did it right from their aesthetics, but it really wasn't all that effective in the end. So we'll see how they do with this turnaround. Last but not least, we talked a lot about GDPR last week, the General Data Privacy Regulation that just went into effect in Europe. And Marcus Fox, who's a longtime listener of the show, sent me an audio clip. I didn't get permission from you, Marcus, to play the clip, so sorry, I'm not going to play it right yet. But, in that clip, he talked a little bit about the fact that when he was talking with experts out there in the field about how to handle the email portion of things, a lot of players were overreacting is the general consensus from the legal minds that are in the UK right now. And what it's coming down to is everybody went away and immediately thought that we need to opt in again. We need to have everybody opt into our mail file before we can mail them. Whereas the best legal minds are now saying that all you have to do is update your end user license agreement or whatever the agreement that you had, your terms and conditions. So I just wanted to put it up to the panel. what's the fallout from this? Can emailers who went out initially going forward saying, we want you to re-opt in, can they just throw that out at this point and say, oh, no, we're just going to put a EULA in front of you and have you just know that you have a new EULA to look over? Is there any way to walk this back? Colin, any thoughts on this? I mean, are they in a good position or a bad position if you already went out to your clients and said, hey, we'd love for you to opt in?
I can't imagine that it's going to be bad, to be honest. I feel like everyone's trying to walk the walk and talk the talk. So I mean, I've seen like a couple hundred of these in the last 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, I mean, frankly, I'm
yes every time.
Frankly, I'm kind of sad because I was thinking that I was going to get a lot of my spam out of my box just by not replying to these opt-in messages, and now suddenly I'm being told that all the mailers need to do is come back and say, "Hey, we've updated our terms and conditions. Here it is if you want to see it," and that's it. That's great for the marketers, but it's going to be a weird experience if you didn't opt in. Suddenly, you're getting emails again from the same person who you didn't opt in for.
Yeah, I think. Well, that goes back to that's a different, at least in my limited knowledge of it. That spam law is a completely different situation than this. This is for websites and cookies and emails, but everything basically is about saying, okay, our stance on your privacy and the data that we have on you and what we're willing to share is now laid out in black and white, and you have the opportunity to read it. But outside of that, the way that you handle it, everyone, I think if you're a reputable company, you have to just stand up at this point and offer up a new terms or new TNC or new EULA and have people opt into it. If you don't, you run the risk of running afoul. But I kind of expected this to blow over a month ago after the Facebook, after Zuckerberg was on Capitol Hill. And the fact that this now came around a month later, it's like it's perpetually in our news cycle. I think the energy for the audience, the American audience, is kind of waning a little bit on it. We've kind of given up on really having any privacy anymore.
Frankly, from everything that we've been talking about last week on the show and from everything that I've heard from people around the globe who listen to the program, it's not really an issue that people are discussing. The general audience out there is not interested in this subject. And, I'm wondering, Lisa, when you had tackled I'm not sure what you had to do with your GDPR situation. I mean, it's just like whether or not you had to, I think I heard Leo saying something like you had to put 30 hours into taking care of your GDPR regulations and figuring this out. But what's your take on the whole situation with mail files and keeping your user data as clean as possible? Are you concerned at this point, or do you feel much more encouraged by this latest news that you can just update your terms and conditions and everything will be fine?
Yeah, it was a scramble for us. We're a small network, but the beauty of being a small tech network is that we do not collect any data from our audience. So we did have to update our privacy policy. That did take about 25, 30 hours. We had to get the legal language reviewed. I feel sorry for, larger companies because they actually have to hire a compliance person to actually implement this. So if they have I think it's over 100 or 200 employees, apparently they have to have a full-time person overseeing it. So for us, it was fairly easy for us to update our privacy policy. We don't collect stuff. The only thing we do is through, we have an opt-in newsletter, so we had to address that. But, I'll be honest with you, if you ask any person on the street that's not in my business or your business, they don't care. They're just like, you know what, I figured I gave up my privacy when I got a cell phone because of the GPS component, and I'm on Facebook and this and that and everything else. So that's kind of also my opinion is people know where to find me if they want to. I think it created a lot of red tape for a lot of people, but yeah, we just pretty much updated our privacy policy. It took some navigation to go through and see what made sense for us. And then, we didn't do anything insane. So I kind of feel sorry for the people that did, but, if all you need to do is update your privacy policy or your terms and conditions and whatever you guys have, then I think that's pretty much all you need to do.
Well, it's been a fascinating time talking through these subjects, but it's time for the AdFail 5 now. But before we do that, I want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Colin Glaum. You can find him at AvertFreeGinsburg.com. That's the home of Avert Free Ginsburg, where he is an executive creative director of digital. Tell us what's going on in your world, Colin. What would you like to promote?
Well, since we were just talking about privacy and security, I've been working on a side project for a number of years called Pull. The company's called Pull Technologies. You can download, it's an app that recognizes the people that you've met in real life and allows you to add them to your phone with just a tap of your finger. So perfect for people who are at conventions or conferences or festivals of any kind. I'm going to be in Cannes in 2 weeks and would love to meet people and be able to exchange contact without exchanging 1,000 business cards, which I don't have to take back to New York and then manually enter. So if you download Pull, I'd love to be able to exchange information with you on the Crosette.
That sounds fantastic. And yes, I've been very aware of your application and very interested in trying it out. So we'll definitely take a look for it. Sloane Kelley, you can find her at thepgatour.com. That's the home of the PGA Tour, where she is a vice president of content. Tell us what's going on in your world, Sloane. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, lots of stuff. My team has been super busy, as always, coming up with some great content. You can check it out at PGA Tour on all of the major social networks, and of course our website and app, pgatour.com. And we do have a couple of open content creation positions right now, so I will certainly plug that if there might be any folks out there that are interested in creating content around our game and our players.
That sounds great. Anybody out there, definitely give Sloane a call. Send her your resume. And last but not least, we have Lisa Laporte. You can find her at twit.tv. Tell us what's going on in your world, Lisa. What would you like to promote?
Well, I'd like to promote Artisanal Agency. I've been working with several brands and other sponsors on direct response campaigns, and we're always looking for high integrity sponsors that want to reach a male tech savvy audience that's, they're high income earners. And if you have a brand that you really want to put out there, then please reach out to me. You can find me at lisa@twit.tv or lisa@artisanalagency.com.
And as for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me, and you can even find out how to advertise on the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And don't forget, transcribeme.com/beancast is your way to get a quick discount on transcription services. They are our official transcription partner, and we can now have transcriptions of all our shows. So check it out at transcribeme.com/beancast. And now it's time for the AdFail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And first up, Lisa, MSNBC host Joy Reid found out why old blog posts are always a danger to keep around. With this happening as much as it does, where people go back into a famous person's old blog posts and pull out the most egregious comments, you'd figure that people would be cleaning up their past blog posts a little bit more judiciously, but she did not, did she?
No, that was the first thing I thought of. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're all young and dumb at some points in our lives, and we write things or we say things that are not necessarily the most appropriate thing. And a part of me is just like, why doesn't she have an assistant going through all of this stuff? I hope that, she's learned and has grown from it, but that's about all you can do, because when you're young, you're going to say things maybe that you'll regret later. And I always tell people, if you're going to say something that's really stupid, please don't back it up in writing. And if you do and you can get rid of it, you should probably go through your old blog posts and take things down.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of cleansing goes a long way. But well, next up, Roseanne gets racist with a spectacular flame out. Oh, my God. Sloane, this is so cringeworthy to actually compare an African American to an ape while you're delivering a crazy rant on Twitter. I mean, what did you think was going to happen?
Oh my God, this was brutal. I have to say, though, the response from Sanofi, because she claimed that Ambien, of course, was the reason for this rant on Twitter, but that company actually called out that racism isn't among their side effects, and I thought that was on point.
Spectacular. Now, Colin, Samantha.
Actually, I'd love to jump in on that because the response from the network was equally, authoritative, fast, and I couldn't believe how quickly that went down. Super proud of them because it was actually a pretty well received show.
Oh yeah, it cost them.
In terms of coming back.
Yeah, it cost them millions and millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in lost ad revenue making that decision. So
yeah,
definitely a hard day at ABC. Next up, Samantha Bee lost a few advertisers over her calling Ivanka Trump a feckless C-word, Colin. I understand the anger and I understand the desire to go after Ivanka Trump, but it seemed a little bit egregious to do that on a TV network. What's your take on this? I mean, it obviously caused a lot of advertiser anxiety.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like it's slightly misdirected to that degree. Maybe, speaking to her husband would be, or about her husband would be just as effective, if not more appropriate. I feel I'm torn about this one because there's no need to be that base, I guess, without, especially with the forum that you have. But if you wanted to, especially being Samantha Bee and the articulate nature that she has and how creative she can be, I think there's a lot of other ways she could have handled it and been a little bit more diplomatic and still gotten her point across without having to raise so much ire. Point taken, but I can't, say that I'm surprised that advertisers would turn their back on her because of the kind of crass use of the wording that she did. I suppose it'd be different if we were in the UK for some reason, but here it's very frowned upon.
Agreed. Next up, British railway company Thameslink compared the recent service outages to being less Godiva and more Poundland chocolate, more Poundland chocolate, referring to the UK discount store Poundland. Poundland, of course, turned around and issued the mother of all smackdowns in return, which Sloane was just classic. They went after them and said, it's like something to the effect that we've never had anybody be late making dinner.
Their exchange was everything. I loved the British humor that was just coming through in that response from Poundland, and ultimately telling Thameslink to remove their post or to face the consequences with, I think, what they called their twitchy legal team. It was totally epic.
It was very, very funny. And last but not least, and this comes from a couple weeks ago, I can't believe I forgot to put it on a previous show, German sweet maker Super Dickman, that alone is worth a good laugh, celebrated the recent royal wedding in spectacularly bad taste with an ad featuring a chocolate-covered marshmallow in a wedding dress. Lisa, I don't even have words for this one. It's so bad.
I just wonder, who's checking their work product these days? I can't imagine with our zero tolerance, Me Too, and I also kudos for taking down the Roseanne show. There's just no tolerance for any of this anymore. But a part of me is how did nobody see that? And how did this get missed? It just makes me wonder who's really checking
what they're
doing there.
They've been caught doing things like this before that have been accused of racism. So I kind of feel like company management is complicit on this. It's completely okay. We will make a nod and it will be like this.
It's terrible. Yeah.
Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag #AdFail5. That's #AdFail and the number 5. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
it's just like you know what I mean. It's like if it's, you know what I mean. I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like you know what I mean. Like it's like totally like that. It's like I don't know. Like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean. Yeah, it's just like kind of. It just seems like it's just like almost exactly.
I was gonna say Keckless Funt, but I couldn't pull the trigger on it.
You could totally pull the trigger. That's hilarious.
See, if she had just said that, you know, I think I kind of would have gone in the other direction.
Yeah, it's like exactly.